that the branches of government are recording, confess, demonstrate, confirm to us all a bunch of ways, but we can only speak about ourselves individually. No, in other words, they've been recording, confessing, demonstrating, confirming. They've been covering up live progressions for how they are and have been used remotely since they were little kids, having replaced with nature and what our founders communicated for us to communicate. A bunch of people involved with stories in the news. They might have the when I hear the stories in the news, I never, in other words, I assume that everything is made up, and then I ask what it's about. Because nature, for example, will shows us the answers this way. If you pretend that everything you heard about witch trials were made up, what are they about? They're about those simultaneous laws that were entrenched with slavery, northern colonies, southern colonies, for example. And then America's founders were born. And nobody had free speech. And our founders wanted and needed that clear. But everyone will prevent it from being clear. Using and self-valuing haven't been used. Criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought, fact-tripping nature, quality aspects in nature, and uses of the names of the people of the sciences that have stayed collusion /s. Speaking and haven't spoken other for where their names and where the names of the sciences properly should have been used and should be used right now. The people of New York City are sickly distinctly from the people of the suburbs across the world. At countries A through Z, the locations, areas, and states, wherever there is a human body of individual bodies, all group differences have now been through and as systems with groups differences appreciation, tactical terror from how nature demonstrates itself generating all the group differences. How does nature show us that? Because nature has other species bodies too. And they also are individual bodies of individuals with all group differences being generated by its own. That's what we are observing, where we observe and how, where and how fish didn't make up how the other species bodies that are not fish and that are not humanity. They didn't make up how we all have the same color, 2 eyes. Quality aspects in nature are the same. All exceptions with demonstration /s are the same thing. There was a further a distinct identity of simultaneous nature that is observable this way in many prey, because we're things we observe and know. Like, too, having black pupils, whites of eyes is inseparable from improper subject treatments of what slavery was about, which partially that was about a breaching method that assigned other to be communicated for nature when nature is not criminal insidiousness nature, per nature itself. Anyone entertains being or having been systems tactical ulterior from its own, which is important too, because it's stays the value of the past, even if it's wiped away. It demonstrates with positive or negative value nature progressions. Positive in the form of evolutions, fruits, gifts, means out of nowhere, and how to cause them, including how to be as fact treatment nature. I don't know if it's her. She should be asked. There's a woman named Sullivan in the news. Even if it's made up and they have the right to lie and they're using it for, even if they have good reasons, because there's a woman who looked just like her, who was one of the ones I noticed at Alina's Pizza, associated with Daryl Sullivan, who's involved with the former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and his co-defendants with planting predicate acts in databases, fake ties, fake natures of ties between students, including with the news, planting predicate acts with a whole bunch of different countries and overt criminal enterprises, plural, at the same time. There was a principal in jail for upskirt pictures at a shopping center who was involved with more natures of organized crimes with the kids before that, and with some of the parents, and kids of a former police chief, Cintron, and intimate ties involved with his family members. like his daughter, reportedly, and recorded. But they're pretending others recorded. A whole bunch of people tied to a police chief in Tron and one years ago involved with a Colo house near me and a Smith house near me. To have a whole bunch of people involved with a Dillon family, a Kevin Dillon, for example, is involved with a whole bunch of people that know my name. I don't know their names at the community center and at Hartford Hospital and at other campuses that have been planting predicate acts with the people on the sides of the campuses, who are also involved with the people at Venus Pizza, with more child abusers, leaders of the kids years apart that they first had roles with, and people who had conversations with my principal behind my back, who are further with WTNH sources, recorded all along Route 175 and its conjunctions, involved with predicate acts with facts, federal evidences, crimes, identity theft, fraud, slanders, with interbranch switching names and forging sequences, and worse. At the same time, with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and terrorists. These are also people with the sides of the World Trade Center, at the World Trade Center, and in a court next to it, the Ninth Circuit Court, right before the World Trade Center attack. These are ones increasingly interstates involved with all sides of criminal and civil cases, their lawyers, their family members, their sources, and the courts. And the same thing, their family members, their people at corners tied to their friends. They're putting fake things in databases. They're used remotely shown at countries A through Z, the names of the people of the sciences. They were and are collusion /S with what no one wanted collusions with. But everyone self-valued that as excuses to themselves and to others when asked questions by people roles with that left out, and or roles sensing for the breaching method. Any body, not roles with it, syntactically and nature-wise. Otherwise, that body would be sensed and is sensed and adapted to, including if that body is a majority of people, including if that body is every single person, Black pupils. None have discerned that whites of eyes decipher that and how it is more probable and it is more practical than that backing convictions and theories regarding the significance of how and of why. It was said that there's one of the things that all Americans remember, for example, is that there's a famous American sentence: don't shoot until you see the whites of eyes. See the nature of debate regarding of things, like regarding the nature of the debates that would address the subject. Is it plausible that is more so as cipher to be deciphered, that famous sentence? You guys can't be honest about this with debate. In the nature of debate, you have quality aspects in nature, self-valuing more and more as is recorded. Other being and having been communicated for our founders, plural, and they asked to be communicated to be discerned as James Madison singular. And the difference of that, you guys can't be honest about the difference of that either. You want to say, oh, well, these are our first presidents. They were technically our founders too. Even George Washington. No one allows honesty about the extortion of George Washington, or it would have brought up how James Madison's plan and the founders behind him had that plan to counter extort and to force the rest of the founders. So George Washington, when he came to Wethersfield, Connecticut, right before the last battle of the Revolutionary War, he had to come to counter extort and force rules to break internationally monitored conversations and relative syntax nature needs no terrorists overt criminal enterprises, private ones. We know they were existing. In other words, one of the things that everyone has common, where everyone has shared self-valued roles, with blaming other things other than ourselves for things our founders communicated for us to blame on a breaching method. And nature itself communicated for us to blame it on the breaching method. And you guys won't be honest about the difference of that either. You guys can't. Increasingly self-value, the words of our founders used, the words of our presidents used, leaving out the breaching method. And again, our founders are distinct from our presidents, including James Madison as the founders. And then he was a president. And he still, as a president, didn't have free speech. This is why and is how slavery was left entrenched. George the Constitution unabridged, and how and why we have rights are too numerous to have to list. For example, it shows that, in other words, no one had the means to defend that, and everyone had to pretend other to an extent, or be discerned, including if that body was a majority of people, including if it was every single person of a colony or all the colonies locked to a unity. As long as it stays a hyper criminally foreign influence unity. I'm not even a lawyer. There nature itself. See, since founding, lawyers too. There have been roles with criminally foreign influence subject treatments, time treatments, relativity treatments, self-valuing more and more. Theory of relativity takes on the sciences used to sense for the breaching method, using the sense and sensibilities of the names of the people of the sciences, A through Z, as a certain type of victim / hyper victim from off all locations, having been on off the locations, hyper additional collusions / S through hyper additional names plural, where it is a singular breaching, hyper singular breaching method / S at A through Z, everywhere the human species body has an individual body. Everywhere there is difference / S. It is now through systems tactical ulterior from natures that shows us its body. It's as a difference, like as a different identity of simultaneous nature. Where how it is not our species body, is not the fish, is not the birds that invented how the bears, how and why we all have two eyes, even though we are distinct bodies, species bodies of individual bodies. So all group differences are in generation of this, which is increasingly demonstration / S to us. All exception nature that appear to be and stay in demonstrating other. They're worse than being used to obfuscate and having been obfuscating. Proper syntax, proper answers. Again, having Black people's white bodies is inseparable from what slavery is about. And this is not to counter for a type of right, it hurts. This is to counter for the clearer than day demonstration that the Constitution is abridged. And our syntax must treat it that way or stay collusion / S. It employed those differences. Everyone to say, well, I think this, I think you guys are a bunch of fake punks when you speak about your emotions. All exception nature. You're saying I show you you're sensing for the breaching method to prevent other people too, because you guys came through 6 campuses. You had means when you were little kids to discern distinctly it was a breaching method against Native Americans as the human body of individual bodies, and sickly distinctly against the colonists, having been since before modern religious messengers. You have sick interpretations of Boolean logic. The A, therefore B. Logic and nature's behind it. Nature debate contains quality aspects in nature employed by the breaching method, the hyperforeign, from before America's founders, not just before America's founders were born. It was already entrenched at countries A through Z before our founders were born. This is why and how really the suburbs, there were homes built before America's founders were even born. Unsafe and nowhere near the capability, a little bit too narrow. You know what I'm saying? Etc. An identity, the relationship to the ground that is only capable of polluting it, only increasingly incapable of sustaining, or even having realized how they made extinct quality aspects of nature of the ground, its identity, relationship to itself, and the only increasing value of that, which is gained here, where evolution's fruits, gifts, means out of nowhere come, or it is forced from here, as a special difference too now, as forced as an negative identity of relationship to itself, to its only perfect positive value nature progression, relative to this special difference that Earth has, temporary / lasting, because the identity of all space / existence is most probable because it is demonstrable, is making more and more of its identity of forever nature through temporary / lasting space nature. And English and the other ancient sciences were revealed to teach this. The parts of speech, of English grammar, are all the parts, everything that is discernible, everything that is, we could discuss. It is invisible but still discernible. The parts of speech are invisible but still discernible. But they do come with the parts of and with the complete identity of, to an extent, all space / existence as a distinct identity of hyper invisible but still discernible. As, why, and how, for example, we need more than one word for a verb. We need more than one invisible but still discernible word for it. And this is where and how for example, the participles, the present participle and the past participle, they are participle natures, and nature is being used as a word for identity, where every identity, just like every part of your body has a semi-nature relationship to your complete identity. Every complete identity has a semi-nature relationship to that identity, again, that which has all the species bodies distinct, but also non-distinct, and simultaneous, but also further as a distinct identity of hyper-simultaneous nature. Neither us nor them, but as all things anyway. And as their value gained here positive, or as it forced from here, leads to hadith, where and how we are shown to appreciate a special difference of everything the way it does. So how everyone speaks about value, positive, negative, truths, lies. You guys left out the difference between criminal and citizen's natures of positive, even peace. Criminal and citizen's natures of peace have been stayed to stay other things, others, ourselves, blamed for things that the breaching method knew would demonstrate to humanity, just as our founders had tried to communicate to us. But they measure and maintain self-body roles being and have been used remotely simultaneously too for way worse than, in other words, uses of the words of our founders, leaving out what they declassified about that, and leaving out what nature declassifies about that. The nature demonstrates about that. Or using words of some author or someone of the names of the people of the sciences, using their words. other than how they communicated about their words, for us to appreciate how everyone's syntax was assigned, only allowed to be, only permitted to be an extent of collusion / S against everyone else and against themselves. And they had to pretend other too, to an extent, / S simultaneously, / hyper simultaneously. There was internationally monitored conversations that were sick, that were timed collusions with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and terrorists simultaneously, / hyper simultaneously. Not just for the natural reasons to discern it. No, we must not let go from how we have black people as whites of eyes. We can't hold on to it if people jump in with teams to pretend that someone's countering it. In other words, it will help black people the most, especially the ones where it's most influenced by the clearer than day at the suburbs, let alone the consciously at the suburban / urban, in the urban too. Tactically denatured to cause negative value nature progressions, acts in nature, and to be a landscape theater, and syntax and nature's tied to it. Oh, but this is that, blaming other things, others, ourselves, for the real causes of negative value nature progressions, acts in natures. See those people, see the designs of those buildings behind the people in rap videos. Again, too, black or white or ABC, jump in. I'll jump in and change it don't keep it apart from the Constitution on a bridge. Then you have to fake and change what other people's words, self-value that having been. Self-value, predicate acts and facts into the database at every campus you went to. And rolls with it, same thing against them, against others at the campuses they went to. Ugh! We gotta ask yourselves, how could they have left out black people's whites of eyes from questions that nature itself and that our founders, communicated for us to address? What caused slavery? There was a human fact tree nature breaching method entrenched, a method singular that everyone had all roles with. That's why the styles of the roles with it were strictly distinctly roles with it, because they had no choice. All exception nature come with demonstration of the same thing, rather than appreciate that nature debate. Again, it contains quality aspects in nature that have criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought, and self-valued by everyone, increasingly to get away with it. Roles being and haven't been used remotely, guys, since you guys were kids. I asked you guys many times to take me off the fake conversations with WFSB, who was in Rocky Hill, who was with intelligence at and next to their location, involved with and as ones at and next to Fox Connecticut News, at and next to WTNH, which is also the FBI, with whole wire crime acts and methods, mail crime acts and methods, and collusion / S with a number of Connecticut police departments and people directly and indirectly involved with home break-ins in my area, and the houses involved with wire crimes of the police departments together as collusion / S with a whole bunch of people from other areas tied to them. And they'll tell you they don't, they know only to an extent. This is why how we have to address too overt criminal enterprises and private ones, and more with the schools. They have wire and mail crime, digital crime acts methods with courts, prosecutors. There are people with the name O'Neill too, who's a teacher. One of them is a teacher with the intelligence community, involved with the intelligence community in West Hartford, who's also has their kids involved with the principal upskirt nature and some sexual and medical offenders of kids. Ones with the name Leahy, and these are a bunch. These are some of the ones, and ones with the name Lombardo, involved with a whole bunch of people on my street and tied to them, who have been planting predicate acts, fake conversations, transcripts, fake transcripts, forging names of doctors, putting whole fake evidences in databases, collusion acts / collusions roles since I was a kid. And there were time to use / S of that collusions too, as people involved with the World Trade Center attack in Manhattan, and the spots next to it, including a court next to it, The court itself had roles with names on both sides of cases, who also had roles with all sides of cases in Connecticut, where everyone's attached to fake in the news at the same time. Everyone's attached to fake and change communications with themselves and with others, and with everyone around themselves too, to keep a quality of fact nature going before court. There are ways to say, well, this is the way things are done. You have to sue or you have to file a police report. They've been recording fake things and no one's checking. They just put fake transcripts at police stations, fake ties to kids. Just because they're police doesn't mean they're not criminally foreign influence. Tactical delusions rock, collusion /S, with a whole bunch of sick natures of things. That the breaching method, when did it let go of its control of all those things? Totally different sick things. Yeah! Please follow mandated law. So there's a Lena's Pizza that did a trick to make it look like with wire crime acts methods, with various natures of investigators, Hartford courts, family members, and the Britain courts, family members, and people associated with Connecticut's district court. These are increasingly people out of the state judicial branch offices and conjunctions to it, and out of the state corrections offices and conjunctions to it. There are proofs, even people, when they're driving by, they were recorded, where how there were all kinds of methods having people, they're using this, well, we don't have time, we're trying to meet, this means this. They're breaking nuances. And then people, in other words, no one has time to go into things because these are connected predicate acts at each age of campus we go to, and in each thing, the difference of it. They have the private school kids running in to cover up live progressions that have been at the private schools since their inception. There are proofs the same thing with the private schools. All natures of difference are being and have been exploited where and how all sides of criminal and civil cases were used for a method to keep the interbranch and the intelligence, foreign and domestic, here and there, criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions raw, more and more self-valuing, where and how they have to defend their side because no one's defending it except for them. In other words, it was never defended at A through Z. That's another thing. That's why it's so important to observe how so many ways other people are only capable of blaming other things, others themselves. Why and how there are negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures between our cities and suburbs. People with the suburbs involved with all kinds of federal evidences, crimes, and rackets against the people of Hartford. It is with the interstates and international, but also for the hyper international involved. And there's differences, racketeering worse than war crimes. See, nature's identity is showing us its difference. This breaching method has those demonstrations, those natural revelations, and true always answers replaced. All pays. Not one has pays. Vaccines. So they have the workers, they have the differences of guilt too, between adults or kids as workers and their family members of the campuses, or the students and their family members, or the people next to the schools, or the news. In other words, or exceptions, because relative to how increasingly there are people planting fake exceptions with the news, there are people who are collusion /S, where and how the judicial branch offices and the corrections offices are used remotely, criminally foreign influence, being and having been collusion /S with the names at and next to all natures of crime scenes and of news locations. The same ones involved also with the public television, Connecticut public access television, YouTube pages, like ones associated with, and people associated with families named Peruta, who I don't know. They sought me out when I was a kid and then as an adult to make it look like other. And with people in my sixth grade class, increasingly involved with the former Mayor Gold and his daughter, putting fake things and fake ties, fake natures of ties to me and others in databases also Jewish themed and interreligious nutbags involved with years apart child abusers, leaders of kids first forced. And these are ones with the interbranch. And you call them a nutbag, for example. They pretend it's personal. That's why they refuse to identify themselves interbranch. They refuse to get on paper. They refuse to identify themselves legitimately, rather. I've been asking you guys for a long time. Increasingly, the Britain Superior Court and other courts, like multiple probate court judges, family members, and a whole bunch of people tied to them, and they're intimatizing them with each other, with the same house slash S next to me, involved with various natures of federal evidences crimes with Wethersfield Police and other police departments, and with the campuses, with their teachers, as their roles putting predicate acts with facts and databases at and between campuses. Increasingly, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed use of their collusion slash S with criminally foreign influence use slash uses of 3 spots at the end of the Berlin Turnpike, of town lines, of all along roads and routes like Route 3 and Route 175. There are ones with there's a father of, I only know 2 of their names, a Mike Del Ferro and a John Del Ferro. They're involved with a whole bunch of people from other areas. I don't even know their names, who have been planting evidences on my street, fake ties, fake natures of ties to me, with the ones with the police departments and the FBI, and whiting forensics increasingly with a Joshua Julian also involved with predicate acts on all sides of my house with them, and with whiting forensics with foreign and domestic police forms, intelligence, family, state police, their family members involved with, also on a mass scale, when they make instances, descriptions as fire departments, as EMS, as Wethersfield Police, as military involved with them. They have been stacking predicate acts with facts. Collusion slash S also with the people who have been doing at each age and nature of campus as collusion slash S. Increasingly, there are ties to names next to each of the campuses I went that sought me out to record, confess, demonstrate, confirm. They have roles of identity theft, fraud, slanders against me that were influenced by others. And their roles with the intelligence families near me that are with the Wethersfield Police and the other departments, forging and switching names and fabricating and having fabricated police reports and other databases. Stuff formally. Fake conversation with me at the Wethersfield Police Station with Wethersfield Police when I was a kid and now as an adult. Increasingly, Central Connecticut State University. There are proofs that people brought up the name Mike Tyson and have roles with Central Connecticut State University. Please, Mike Tyson. Please get them on paper, one name in sequence. These are also some black KKK Confederate flag themed on and off the campuses, intercities, with the family members of multiple leaders of campuses of kids that were abused, but they also have abuses of other kids' roles. This is also relative right where and how everyone's forced to speak through others, for how that is exploited. Because this breaching method uses and has used how all sides of criminal and civil cases and the courts themselves put in self-valued sequence shifts, changing and faking evidences as collusion slash S with all natures of crime scenes and roles with all natures of criminal and seditious natures of positive, not just negatives. With all negatives too. There are other names involved. They have all kinds of crime methods involved where they record people speaking. They have people listen in the back of the ground of a conversation. Joe DeMoro is a little dope. I recorded him. He called up and pretended other after I had recorded him. He's increasingly involved with a Mr. Abruzzi and kids and adults associated with Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut, and people next to Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut, who have been putting fake ties and natures of ties between kids at each of the campuses. I never had a class with Joe DeMoro. And when I was in a middle school, summer school class with Joe DeMoro, Heather Hansen, and Ray Claw. And Heather Hansen and Joe DeMoro and Mike Kerr were sharing Heather Hansen with other people at the same time. They were together. They wanted to pretend they didn't know that. I mean, they were friends, and they were fighting about it in other contexts. And in other words, I never even had a class with Heather Hansen. The only context I know of her in, she was recorded and increasingly involved with federal evidences crimes, identity theft, fraud, sequence shifts, and people involved with home break-ins years ago who are still increasingly involved with it. These are also people increasingly with fire departments with EMS, like ones with the name Leahy, increasingly involved with prosecutors and judges involved with untimely deaths and sexual and medical offenders of kids, and people spreading lies behind kids to their teachers and ways to keep their sense and sensibilities, making subject treatments, as collusion / as to an extent, realizing that's plausible, but so this keeps the future people incapable of affording discern what actually was and is value / values / value progressions value. Inside that, we are all semi-nature to relativity to. This is how English is real to be taught. Appreciating the identity, the science to share, and how not to show us, and how it shows us how it uses how they appear not to show us how it does anyway. Again, it is not our species body that revealed all these things the way they are. It is not the other species bodies, but it is all things anyway. That is discernible to an extent / as connected by a singular identity, as a singular identity of value / value progression. Also simultaneously three ways group. And five. And the difference of that too, though, was,